Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. About 5 years ago, I purchased an undeveloped corner lot in a suburban area about 20 minutes from where I live. The neighborhood was one I knew well, as my grandparents had lived there when I was growing up. When my grandfather passed away, he left me a modest inheritance, and I decided to invest it in real estate. The empty lot was perfect. It sat at the corner of a cul-de-sac in a rapidly developing area. Property values were climbing steadily, and I figured I could sit on it for a few years, then either build something or sell it for a tidy profit. In the meantime, I visited every couple of weeks to keep the grass cut and make sure everything was in order. The neighborhood had changed since my grandparents' time. What was once a quiet suburb with one-car families had evolved into a densely packed community where most households had at least 2 vehicles, sometimes more. Street parking was becoming scarce, and I often noticed cars lining both sides of the narrow roads when I came to check on my property. For the first 2 years, everything was fine. I'd wave to neighbors when I saw them, and occasionally chat with the older residents who remembered my grandparents. I wasn't part of their HOA since my lot was undeveloped, but I kept it neat out of respect for the community. I'd even let the neighbors know my rough timeline for development, and most seemed appreciative of my transparency. That all changed last summer. I had been especially busy at work and hadn't visited the property in about a month. When I finally made it out there one Saturday morning, I immediately noticed something was off. The grass was trampled in several areas, and there were distinct tire tracks cutting across what had previously been pristine lawn. At first, I assumed it might have been teenagers using it as a hangout spot or maybe a delivery truck that had taken a wrong turn. I spent a few hours that day pulling weeds and picking up random bits of trash that had accumulated, including several coffee cups and cigarette butts. I also noticed that one of my no trespassing signs was missing, which I found odd but not alarming. The following weekend, I decided to come back and install a new sign. As I pulled up to the property around 11 a.m., I was shocked to see 3 cars parked neatly in a row on my lot. None of the owners were in sight. Even more surprising was a crude handwritten sign staked into the ground that read "Additional Parking." I sat in my car, completely baffled. Who would have the audacity to not only park on private property but to designate it as a parking area? I decided to wait and see if the owners returned. After about 30 minutes, a middle-aged woman with a blonde bob emerged from the house directly across from my lot. She was carrying grocery bags and heading straight for one of the cars. I got out of my vehicle and approached her. "Excuse me," I said politely. "I'm the owner of this property and I noticed you've been parking here." She looked me up and down with obvious skepticism. "You're the owner? This empty lot? It's been sitting here forever." "Yes, I am. I bought it 5 years ago as an investment property." The woman, who I would come to know as the neighborhood's resident Karen, let out a dismissive laugh. "Well, it's just collecting weeds anyway. We're actually doing you a favor by maintaining it." "Maintaining it? There are tire tracks all over, and someone removed my no trespassing signs." She shrugged, placing her groceries in her trunk. "Look, parking has become a nightmare around here. People have guests, teenagers get cars. What are we supposed to do? This lot is just sitting here empty." "It's still private property," I explained, trying to remain calm. "I didn't give permission for anyone to park here or to put up signs." As we were talking, another neighbor emerged from a nearby house and approached us. He was a tall man with a confident stride who introduced himself as the HOA president. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking between us. Before I could respond, Karen jumped in. "He claims he owns this lot and doesn't want us parking here anymore." "I don't claim to own it. I do own it," I corrected, growing increasingly frustrated. "And yes, I'd appreciate if people would stop using it as a parking lot without my permission." The HOA president gave me a patronizing smile. "Listen, we've been using this space for community overflow parking for months now. It's been working out great for everyone. Possession is 9/10 of the law, you know." "That's not how property law works," I countered, "and I visit regularly. This is new." A small crowd of neighbors had started to gather, drawn by our conversation. Most looked annoyed with me rather than embarrassed about being caught trespassing. "We thought the lot was abandoned," one woman chimed in. "No one ever does anything with it." "You should be grateful we're not using it as a dumping ground," another man added. "Some wanted to start a community garden without asking." It was clear this wasn't a misunderstanding. The neighbors had collectively decided my property was available for their use, and they felt entitled to it. I took a deep breath and decided this wasn't a battle I could win on the spot. "I understand parking is tight in the neighborhood," I said finally, "but this is still my private property. Please remove your vehicles and the sign by the end of the day." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Whatever. We'll move the cars, but don't be surprised if the city starts fining you for property neglect. This lot is an eyesore." I left feeling frustrated and disrespected. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what the HOA president had said about them using my lot for months. How long had this been going on without my knowledge? The next day, I drove back to the property earlier than usual and parked down the street where I could observe without being seen. Sure enough, around 8 a.m., cars began pulling onto my lot one after another. I watched in disbelief as Karen actually directed traffic, pointing out where each car should park to maximize space. By 8:30, there were 7 vehicles neatly arranged on my property. That evening, I did some research and learned about adverse possession laws in my state. Essentially, if someone openly used my property without permission for a certain period, typically many years, they could potentially claim ownership. While we were nowhere near that time frame, the fact that the entire neighborhood seemed to be in on this scheme was concerning. The following weekend was even more shocking. I drove by my property and discovered it had been turned into a full-blown parking lot for what appeared to be a neighborhood block party. Cars were packed in haphazardly, and a new, larger sign had been erected that read "Party Parking." Some attendees had even set up a small tent on one corner of my property, complete with a cooler of drinks. This had gone too far. I contacted a property attorney first thing Monday morning and scheduled a consultation. The attorney confirmed my fears. While adverse possession would take years to establish, the neighbor's actions could potentially create an easement by prescription if left unchallenged. More immediately concerning was my liability if someone were injured on my property. "You need to address this immediately," the attorney advised. "Document everything, send formal notices, and consider physical barriers to prevent unauthorized access." Over the next week, I gathered evidence. I installed a small hidden trail camera that captured dozens of vehicles coming and going at all hours. I documented license plates, took photographs of the damage to the lawn, and even recorded conversations with neighbors who openly admitted they'd been using my lot for parking. During one visit, I overheard Karen talking to another neighbor just beyond the property line. "He thinks he can just show up after months and reclaim his precious dirt patch," she said loudly enough for me to hear. "But we've established a community need. The HOA is already discussing whether we can petition the city to claim it for public use." That was the final straw. I spent the next 2 weeks meticulously planning my response. I contacted multiple fencing companies and settled on a contractor who could install a 6-foot privacy fence around the entire perimeter, complete with a secure gate. I researched local regulations for operating a paid parking lot and filed the necessary paperwork to establish a legitimate business entity. I even took time off work to ensure I could oversee the entire operation. The fence company agreed to start work at 6 a.m. on a Monday, before most of the neighbors left for work. I arrived even earlier to document the state of my property, which had about 9 cars parked overnight. I had the towing company on standby, but wanted to give the owners a chance to move their vehicles before taking that step. As the fence contractor began unloading materials, I watched from my car as lights flicked on in the surrounding houses. Karen was the first one out, still in her bathrobe, rushing toward us with a look of outrage. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, arms crossed. "Good morning," I replied calmly. "I'm installing a fence around my property. I noticed there are several vehicles that need to be moved before work can continue." "You can't just put up a fence. This is community parking now. It's my private property and I'm well within my rights to secure it. The owners have 30 minutes to move their vehicles before they're towed at their expense." Karen stormed off, pounding on doors to alert the other car owners. Within 20 minutes, all the vehicles had been hastily removed, and the fence installation proceeded without further interruption. By late afternoon, my property was fully enclosed with a professional-grade fence, and I'd installed 4 security cameras covering every angle. But the pièce de résistance was the large, professionally printed sign I attached to the gate. "Private parking, $200 ADA or $50 per hour contact for permission unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. By parking on this property, you agree to these terms." I included my business phone number and the newly registered name of my parking enterprise. The legal entity was important, as my attorney had advised me to separate this from my personal assets. The reaction was immediate and intense. My phone began ringing before I'd even left the property. I let most calls go to voicemail, but answered Karen's just to hear what she had to say. "You can't do this! People need to park! This is extortion!" she shouted without even saying hello. "I'm simply exercising my rights as a property owner," I replied. "If you or your neighbors would like to rent parking spaces, I'd be happy to discuss rates. In fact, I've prepared an invoice for your household's unauthorized use over the past 3 months. Invoice? You must be joking." Not at all. Based on our documentation, vehicles registered to your address have parked on my property approximately 30 days in the past 3 months. At $200 per day, that comes to $6,000. I'll email it over for your records. She sputtered in disbelief before hanging up. Similar conversations played out with several other neighbors, though a few surprised me with their approach. One elderly gentleman called to apologize. "I didn't realize it was private property," he explained. "The HOA president told us it had been arranged with the owner. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." Another neighbor, who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac, stopped by in person. "I knew this would blow up eventually," he admitted. "Karen and the HOA president have been telling everyone the lot was abandoned and that they were in talks to acquire it for the neighborhood. When you showed up that day, a lot of us realized we'd been misled." These conversations gave me valuable insight into how this situation had developed. It seemed that a small group, led by Karen and the HOA president, had orchestrated the whole thing, convincing others that they had some right to use my property. The following morning, I arrived to find Karen and the HOA president waiting by the gate with what appeared to be a petition in hand. "We've gathered signatures from everyone in the neighborhood," the HOA president announced. "We're formally requesting that you remove this fence and return the property to community use." I took the petition and glanced at it briefly before handing it back. "I appreciate your community spirit, but this isn't how property rights work. If the neighborhood wants to use this land, you're welcome to make an offer to purchase it at market value." "We can't afford market value," Karen snapped, "and you're being completely unreasonable. Nobody was hurting your precious dirt patch." "Actually, I've documented significant damage to the land, unauthorized signage, littering, and consistent trespassing. My attorney has prepared cease and desist letters for everyone who's been parking here illegally. But I'm willing to waive the past fees if you all sign acknowledgments of the property boundaries and agree to stop trespassing." The HOA president's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "Fees? You can't actually enforce those retroactively." "My attorney disagrees, but we can let a judge decide if you prefer that route." Over the next week, most neighbors signed my agreement, acknowledging that they had no right to use my property without permission. Karen and the HOA president held out the longest, even threatening legal action, but eventually backed down when my attorney sent formal letters outlining the potential claims for trespassing, property damage, and unauthorized use. Surprisingly, this story didn't end with me simply reclaiming my property. As weeks passed, something unexpected happened. A local business owner approached me about renting several spaces for employee parking. Their office was just down the street, and they were willing to pay $100 per spot per month for guaranteed parking. This got me thinking. The neighborhood genuinely did have a parking problem, and I had a potential solution. I hired a contractor to properly grade the lot and lay gravel to create a legitimate parking area. I set up a simple automated system where people could pay via app or text message for daily or monthly parking. Within 3 months, my empty lot was generating nearly $2,000 per month in parking revenue. I offered neighborhood residents a discounted rate of $50 per month for a guaranteed spot, and many took advantage of it, including some of the same people who had previously parked there without permission. The HOA, seeing the success of my operation and still facing parking shortages, eventually approached me with an offer to purchase the lot for community use. Their initial offer was actually above market value, which confirmed my suspicion that property in the area was becoming even more valuable than I'd anticipated. Instead of accepting, I used their offer as leverage in negotiations with a commercial developer who had been eyeing the area. In the end, I sold the property for nearly triple what I had paid 5 years earlier. As a goodwill gesture to the community, I donated a portion of the proceeds to help fund improvements at the neighborhood park, including additional parking spaces. This earned me considerable goodwill from most residents, who now viewed me as reasonable and community-minded rather than the villain Karen had made me out to be. Speaking of Karen, she put her house on the market about 6 months after our confrontation. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd become something of a pariah after the truth about her role in the parking scheme came to light. Apparently, she'd been charging some residents administrative fees to use her community parking lot, pocketing the money while telling everyone else it was free community parking. Looking back on this bizarre chapter of my life, I'm still amazed at how entitled some people can be. What started as a simple investment property turned into a lesson on property rights, community dynamics, and standing up for yourself. I never expected to become a parking lot entrepreneur, but sometimes the best opportunities come from the most unexpected challenges. In the end, those neighbors who thought they could claim my property as their own parking space ended up paying for it one way or another, either through legitimate parking fees or through the social consequences of their entitlement. As my grandfather used to say, there's no such thing as a free lunch, or in this case, free parking. The next one is a malicious compliances story. There are a handful of rules to saluting in the American military. The when, why, and how is drilled into you from boot camp until the day you leave. Even the order in which the salutes are rendered have meaning. When it comes to vehicles, there are helpful insignia and stickers to indicate if it's an officer, such as a colored sticker located on the front windshield. My base was small enough where it was everyone's job at some point to do sentry duty at the front gate, which had housing for military families. Sentry duty was pretty basic. You'd stop every vehicle, check IDs, and then wave them through. If they were an officer, you'd see it coming with those colored stickers, and after verifying the identify of the officer, you'd salute and send them on their way. One day, while on duty, I approached a vehicle with an officer's sticker, and there was only the officer's wife driving in the vehicle. I returned her ID, wished her a nice day, and waved her through, pausing with a stern look. "Where's my salute, Petty Officer Citizen Alpha?" Now, Karen here was wife to a higher-ranking officer, and has fallen under the impression people are saluting her somewhere along the way. Some of the junior enlisted might have even been saluting her, as they're pretty easy to bully and more prone fuck-ups. I politely replied, "Ma'am, salutes are only rendered to commissioned officers," angrily pointing her chubby little fingers at the front of her windshield towards her husband's officer sticker. "I have a sticker, and you need to salute the sticker." Curtly, I continued, "I'm afraid that sticker is not an officer either." Frustrated, she pulled through and left my post, my cover guy, the guy keeping me safe with a big gun, and I watched her drive down the street and pull right into the administrative building with the top brass and huffed into the building as quickly as her soft, shitty body would take her. We exchange a look between us with wry smiles, knowing exactly where this is probably going. Later that day, we get a new official base-wide mandate. From here forward, all enlisted will salute vehicle stickers of officers regardless of who's in the vehicle. Roger that. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. It's worth noting that when you salute an officer as enlisted, you do it first, and you hold that salute until you are saluted in return and they lower theirs. Only then do you lower your salute. It signals that you're saluting them and they're replying. Additionally, when saluting a group of officers, you generally direct your salute and greeting to the highest-ranking individual. Now, as far as I know, this stupid sticker salute order has no accommodation for how a 2004 Toyota Camry fits into the officer's pecking order. Additionally, if the car is unoccupied, it's not like that sticker is removed. After that order came through, we all began saluting stickers. Personally, I'd direct my salute to the sticker. I would also prioritize sticker salutes over officers. Let me tell you, walking through parking lots was a blast as I saluted empty cars on my way to wherever. More and more people saw me doing it, and more people started doing it. Not long after the order was publicly rescinded, which hilariously had the balancing effect of never rendering a salute to anyone but a clearly known officer, cementing Karen never getting her unearned salutes. The next one is an entitled people story. This one is going to be a hard story to tell. I've written about my parents in here before. I grew up with my mom and stepdad, but even though my dad was a little more supportive, he still wasn't someone I could always rely on. I'm not going to go into every single thing that happened, but I'll just say this. Between the ages of 9 and 13, I was in and out of the hospital constantly with a stress-induced stomach condition. I was so anxious that I would throw up from sheer fear until I was completely dehydrated and needed to be hospitalized. Let that give you an idea of how badly my mom treated me. And no, she never hit me, but she genuinely seemed to enjoy humiliating me and making me cry. The moment I turned 18, I cut contact with her. We tried to reconnect a few times over the years, but it always ended the same way. But this story is harder for another reason. When I finally escaped her, I met a guy I really loved, and he loved me too, at least at the beginning. We were together for 7 years and lived together for 3 of them. I was the happiest person in the world. Our relationship was so stable, calm, and honest. And let's just say things were great in the bedroom too. I thought this was how my life would always be. A few months before our wedding, his parents suggested that we move in with them for a while. They had a big house with 2 spare bedrooms, so we could take one of them. The idea was to save some money, and they even offered to help us with part of the down payment for a place of our own. Of course, we said yes. We moved in with them, and the wedding was already planned. Life felt perfect. Literally a week after we moved in, my beloved didn't come home for the night. I called him. I was worried. At 4 a.m., he picked up the phone, completely drunk, and started yelling the most awful insults at me. He told me to F*** off. When he came back around 9 a.m., he went to sleep in another room. He woke up with the obvious hangover, but when I tried to talk to him, he broke up with me. He said he had another girl and she lived on the same area as his parents. When we were living in another city, he couldn't see her. But now, after last night, he realized he wanted her, not me. My world came crashing down, but that's not the point of this post. First to react was my father. He immediately came over and took me to his place. For one night. Yes, I'm really grateful to him. Because I had nowhere to go, and I needed that strong man who marched into what was essentially a stranger's house and used his authority to make it clear that anyone who hurt me should be on guard. He took me away with a few harsh words directed at my almost husband. It was somehow comforting, but I still didn't have a place to stay for longer. Someone must have told my mom about the whole situation, and she actually got in touch with me. I was in total shock. It felt like animals were suddenly speaking with human voices at Christmas. She wrote to me saying that she was out of the country, but our old apartment was vacant. She said if I had nowhere to go, I could stay there for a week. I sincerely thanked her, and that's what I did. It basically saved my life, because during that time I was able to recover a little, and I found a rental apartment closer to my work. But for some naive reason, I thought that maybe this experience had stirred something in my mom, maybe some parental feelings. On the last day, I made a wonderful meal and sent her a message saying that if she felt like it, and if she agreed, I had made something delicious and would love to talk to her. I told her that life was really tough for me right now, and that I could really use a conversation with my mom. I also mentioned that I had found a rental place and would be leaving soon, but maybe we could meet. I got a message from her saying that she was already leaving the airport and heading home, and that I had literally 30 minutes to leave the apartment. She said if she saw me, I'd regret ever being born. Oh, panic mode. I was packed. The apartment was cleaned, but I still had some small things to take care of. I didn't expect to have to leave that quickly. A moment later, I got another message. There's no traffic. I'm almost there. You have a maximum of 5 minutes, and you better not be there when I arrive. I shoved the entire dinner into the fridge and ran out as fast as I could. I was literally by the exit door when I saw a taxi pull up on the street, and my mom was inside. In a panic, I threw myself into a big bush with my bag. It was a long and thick shrub, and hid behind it. There was no way I would have made it to the street in time. I'm lying on the ground, clutching my bag to my chest, hidden behind the bush. My mom walks by just a few meters away from me, not alone. With her lover. I knew him. They had been meeting occasionally for the last 10 years. He was one of many, but I knew all of them. That's why I wasn't supposed to be there. Everything's clear now. I trudged along with my bag, which held my whole world, my shattered life, with a broken heart and feeling more alone than I ever had in my life, straight to my office. Because my new apartment was only available the next day, I decided to go back to work and sleep there, and 2 hours later I got a message from my mom. The salmon you prepared for dinner was exquisite. I didn't reply. The next one is an entitled parent story. I'm 20F from the UK and a single mother. For context, my ex-partner was abusive and is currently in prison serving sentences regarding domestic violence, strangulation, and threats to kill. There's actually 6 charges in total. All UK prisoners are now being released around the 40 to 50% mark of their sentence. I have a 6-month-old baby, and he is the father. And he threatened to call me and her. Even when I was pregnant, he said he would TB my stomach and all sorts of horrible things. He gets out of prison this year, so the council have offered me a council home. It's a lovely 2-bedroom detached bungalow for me and my daughter, so he doesn't know where I'm living and can't harm us. I told my dad today that I've been offered the place, and he said I'm a bad mother for even considering moving into a council home, which is insane because I grew up in a council house myself. Said that I am selfish and my baby will have to face the consequences of my terrible life decisions. I don't know what to do. My dad is a textbook narc, by the way, and I really don't use that term lightly. I know it's become a big thing on social media to just call everybody bad a narcissist, but he really is one, and everyone in our household says it. He loves having control, power over everything. I don't like raising my baby in here. He constantly calls her his baby. When she was 3 months old, I was cutting her nails and accidentally cut a bit of her skin, and I started hysterically crying about it. She cried for probably 15 seconds and then didn't care. But he yelled at me for about an hour and still mentions it now. I just feel like I'm constantly on edge. The first red flag was when she was born. He rushed to the hospital straight away. So fast that I was still being stitched up in my vagina when he burst in my delivery room and I was covered in blood. The midwives all told him he couldn't go in there because it was an active surgery, but he ignored them because he wanted to see his granddaughter. He gave me no time to cuddle my baby on my own, or to even just have an hour to get ready for visitors. That's the kind of person he is, and when I tell people that they think it's insane. I've told him I wanted his opinion on the situation, and rather than giving it to me, he just hurled loads of abusive name-calling at me, and I don't know what to do. Please help. Am I a bad mom if I move into a council house? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you